Oh, good evening. Hope people could hear me. Gonna give it a little bit of a minute here. The topic tonight is about an FBI informant who allowed two future 9/11 hijackers to live with him. Story is not really reported by the media, um, and it's a story which a lot of people should come to know, but they rarely will ever know about it, which is understandable because of the slight underreported nature surrounding it. But it's very important because it had huge implications about the nature of the operations, how expansive it is. Good evening. We got Ecom, Anthony Giovanni, and P. Dizzy. What's up, guys? Um, yeah, it's about an FBI informant um, in California, and he had a code name. And I'm going to talk about this. It ain't going to be a very long video either. So it'll be pretty short. I'm hoping to condense it within 20 minutes, 25 minutes. But it's an interesting story. It's really fascinating when you think about it and you're like, wow, I wish I knew more about it. Um, well, I'll do my best to try and elucidate the story to you. Um, but first, got to talk about what led to the informant. Um, so we have to go back to 1994. Um, there's the special agent FBI unit chief out of the San Diego field office who goes by the name of Steven Butler. Um, when Butler first started in 1994, he was going through making his bones, as they say, as a flatfoot. There was a recent bombing in Orange County, California, that led to some think it was a deliberate bombing, a small bombing, not a big bombing. In Orange County, if you're not familiar with it, it's very diverse. It's home to many Orthodox Catholics, but it has a large population of Arabs due to the very warm climate there. It's also a beautiful place. I've been there. I lived in for a period of time in Laguna Niguel, which was probably the best looking city I've ever seen. Everything there is green. It's like everything is brand new. The Walmarts there were just beautiful place. Um, so Butler was hitting the streets and investigating the crime of the bombing the old-fashioned way. Him himself, he didn't have a partner. And when he was investigating this bombing, the neighborhood he was in was called Lemon Grove, which is a town in Orange County. And it was through his contacts with Arabs in Lemon Grove that led him to an individual by the name of Abdussattar Sheikh. Um, and Abdussattar Sheikh was known in the Arab community. He's a very affable fellow, very private, but he was very sociable. He knew a lot of the people by their first names, went to the local mosque there, was known at the university. Guy was everywhere. It was fantastic. And so Butler hit it on right away with this guy and said, well, you know what? We have a lot of persons of interest regarding the people in the neighborhood. This guy could provide some valuable information as becoming an asset. So on May 14th, 1994, Butler pitched the idea of making Abdussattar Sheikh an asset to the FBI. And Sheikh saw this as an opportunity to use this in a way where if he ever got in trouble, he could use the FBI to get him out of trouble. And so they agreed. And so Butler gave him a code name, and his code name was Stan, Stan, Stan. And according to a later document called the FBI Inspector General Review of the FBI's handling of information relating to the 9/11 attacks, I'm going to quote you from the document. Quote, Stan was normally questioned about specific individuals who were under investigation by the FBI, although he occasionally volunteered information that he thought might be relevant, end quote. So, in other words, he provided information, menial information, relevant information to the FBI to keep them interested. Um, and that's what made him a 10-year informant. He was an informant for 10 years. So, in the spring of 1996, Stan, who I'm going to refer to Abdussattar Sheikh as Stan, began renting out rooms in his 5-bedroom home in Lemon Grove, California. Stan would tell his handler, Steven Butler, who at this point had a really comfortable and close relationship with him, that he about his background because he didn't know really that much. So Stan told him that he was a professor at San Diego State University and also the vice president for the international projects at American Commonwealth University in Virginia and in California. Um, One late evening, Stan would tell Butler in a conversation between the two, who are now considered friends, that Stan was born in India in 1954, and he became a naturalized citizen in 1976. Uh, and Butler's talk with Stan would become sporadic over the months um, because his information was still relevant and uh, semi important, but it wasn't too much where he would be in constant contact with him. So even though he was a staple at the Islamic Center of San Diego, um, he provided Butler with enough information about people like, for example, people who were overstaying their U.S. visas. And the FBI would be interested in that because that's an immigration and naturalization violation. The FBI would detain these people and then they would hand them over to the INS, and then they would either give them a chance to, uh, now it would be rare, but they would give them a chance to re-upload, refill their application, whether it be a U.S. Uh, work visa or a student visa, or a B1 student, B2 student visa, or that they would just deport them. So nothing really stood out about Stan, and nothing was really known about this man, who Butler considered a man with principles. But it wasn't until one April afternoon in the year 2000, April 13th, 2000, Stan went to the Islamic Center bulletin board, the mosque that he frequented, and there was a billboard there where you could put letters, flyers on there, and he posted an announcement letter in which the letter was written in English and explained that rooms were available in Lemon Grove for visiting Arabs in the country. It provided his address and his phone number, and it also had a short request on it that whoever wished to rent rooms were to be observant Muslims, pious Muslims. And over the next few days, Stan would go and visit the secretary's office of the mosque. And after some small talk and some, innocent chat, one day on April 13th of 2000, the secretary pointed behind the sheikh near the hallway and said that there were two men who wished to speak with him. So the sheikh went over into the hallway and introduced himself, and the two men introduced themselves to him. They said, well, the two individuals were identified, who identified themselves to him as Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Now, al-Hazmi spoke no English at all, and Nawaf al-Hazmi, spoke very little. So both of the men spoke Arabic to Stan, who gave his actual name to both al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi. He didn't give him his code name, obviously. So they explained to him that they needed a place to stay very badly because they have nowhere to go. Um, al-Hazmi explained that they were living in an apartment which was close by to the Islamic Center, but that they had to leave the premises because the owner of the home was leaving for Saudi Arabia. Now, according to the 9/11 Commission report, this is important. The commission staffer Dietrich Snell stated during the commission trials that it was not known where Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi was staying in the first 2 weeks. But through reading unredacted and redacted files from the FBI, and later now known in the depositions of certain Islamic officials, Saudi officials, they were staying in a residence or a hotel paid by the Imam of the King Fahd Mosque in Culver City, Los Angeles, Fahad al-Thumeri. Fahad al-Thumeri told a Tunisian cab driver who was named Khalid Benamarine to pick up two Saudis at LAX airport, Los Angeles International Airport. He didn't tell the cab driver their names. He just said there were two Saudis with a third individual who we don't know who that is. So Khalid Benamarine picked up these two individuals and dropped them off at the King Fahd Mosque where they met with Fahd al-Thumeri. So that's where they were staying at. And from there, Fahad al-Thumeri left for Saudi Arabia, and these two guys needed a place to stay. And so they went to this mosque. I don't know how they got to this mosque. That's another question. But they're here and they answered they responded to the letter left by Abdussattar Sheikh, who at this point is an FBI informant. The apartment was rented by a Saudi on Mount Ada Avenue. And of course, it's Sheikh's apartment. But he really felt like sad for these two guys because they just came to the country. They barely speak English. So he agreed to rent the room to them. And they signed a contract with Stan on May 10th, 2000. Now, at this time, nobody knew that these two guys were staying here. Stan would try to get a relationship going with these two guys. He told them that he was an English professor at San Diego State. And then he told both of them that they should take English courses so they can learn the language better in the country. However, Stan would sometimes find al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi in the middle of the day lounging at home and not at the English classes where they attended for the first couple of days and they stopped. And Stan would say, why aren't you going to the schools? And al-Hazmi would respond that the class was not good and that they wouldn't attend anymore. But both of these guys were mostly secretive and they were always together and never around others except Stan. They never commiserated with anybody outside of the apartment. Khalid al-Mihdhar would basically tell Stan about their wish to take flight training nearby at the schools, in which Stan would reply the obvious, which, you can't go to a flight school if you don't know English. And that it was rather important that if they wanted to become pilots in the country, that they had to learn English. And so they went back to the English classes, but then they stopped again because they just didn't care to learn. So they went to the flight school. The name escapes me. The flight school they went to, and they were kicked out because they couldn't even pass the application because they can't write in English. So, and actually, if we're to believe the the government story, which came from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin Al Shib. And by the way, even if they were telling the truth, we have to throw that in doubt because they were tortured at a CIA black site, that they were selected to be pilots, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. They were the first 9/11 hijackers in the country. So that plan went out the window. But according to Stan, they were both pious Muslims. Uh, and according to one example of their modesty, was that when they were watching television, there was this cheerleader who was scantily clad, and he came on the screen, and al-Mihdhar asked Stan to turn the TV off. And the three men would practice Salah, which is the Islamic dawn prayers. So they were observant Muslims. They practiced practicing Muslims. They prayed 5 times a day. They did the Salat and the Salah, the night and evening prayers. One day, another Saudi came to visit Stan, and you probably heard of his name. His name was Omar al-Bayoumi. And both of the men became good friends, which started at the Islamic Center in San Diego, where they first met. Incidentally enough, al-Bayoumi would greet al-Hazmi, who he saw mingling at Stan's home, and stated that it was he who referred al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi to Stan. Because if you know about the story that I've done videos on, when the first two men came to the United States, they went to a restaurant in Los Angeles, and Omar al-Bayoumi met them there in this small little halal restaurant out of the hundreds of restaurants. What a seemingly convenient coincidence. Right. So when al-Bayoumi left, Nawaf al-Hazmi explained to Stan that him and Khalid al-Mihdhar didn't trust al-Bayoumi because they thought he was a Saudi agent. He was always carrying a camera around, always giving out money, always questioning other Arabs where they were staying at. So, yeah, and that's how he got to met Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Remember, he gave the both men the first 2 months rent in the apartment. He let them use his cell phone. He gave them money. And Nawaf al-Hazmi also explained to Stan that al-Bayoumi would always carry around this video recorder and take pictures and video of the environment, of them. And while that was going on, there was reports from the neighbors who lived nearby Stan and al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi. And the FBI would later interview them after September 11th. And it would later be found out that 2 visits from 2 men who were later identified as Muhammad Atta and Hani Anjur entered the home of Stan and visited Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. This was reported in the FBI interviews of the residents of Lemon Grove. These are available in the NARA website, the National Archives. So you can read them for yourselves. And they said that they came in limos. They sometimes would party, which would go against the claim that these were pious Muslims. They weren't. On July 12th of 2000, 2 days before Nawaf al-Hazmi's visa expires, he files a 1-539 application to extend his application at the California Service Center of the Immigration Naturalization Services. Now, Stan went with them to do this with them because, again, he knew very little English, didn't know his way around. And so Stan basically filed out the application for Nawaf al-Hazmi's U.S. visa. However, the I-539 form wasn't received by the California Service Center until July 27, 2000. And it's officially considered a late filing. It's a filing, but it's a late filing, and it goes on your record. Now, During the month of June, Steven Butler goes to the home of Stan. And Stan explains to him that I have two guys just came into the country. Um, they were living in Saudi Arabia. They just arrived, but he only told Steven Butler, his handler, their first names because Butler wanted to know who they were. Khalid and Nawaf. Didn't tell him his last names. And Stan told Butler that they were good religious Muslims who are here to attend flight training schools. They want to learn English, blah, blah, blah. So another visit by Butler in the following week asks him for their last name so he could run them through the tip-off database. The tip-off database is the terrorist watch list to see if these guys, have any connections to Arab fundamentalist groups or organizations here or abroad. But the Stan refuses to provide the last names. He gives them the runaround. Oh, and that's right. I have to correct myself. He doesn't tell them that they were interested in flight training. That's right. I was wrong about that because that's important, right? So he only told them that they were here. They were good Muslims. They were going to school, but he didn't tell them they were going to flight school or that they wanted to. But not to lose Butler, Stan told Butler that Nawaf had contact with at least four individuals he knew were of interest to the FBI and about whom he previously reported to Butler before. This raised alarm bells for Butler, obviously. And now he's really interested in who Khalid and Nawaf was so he could run them in the tip-off database. So Stan gave Butler the runner. He says, "Come back another time, and I'll try to get you the information." But shortly after that visit by Butler, Khalid al-Mihdhar flies to Germany, leaving Nawaf al-Hazmi alone with Stan. Now, Khalid al-Mihdhar took a connecting flight from Germany to Yemen because he wanted to visit his wife, who just gave birth. Later on, according to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, this got him mad, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and he was going to take him off the operation. Take this with a grain of salt, by the way. And bin Laden tells Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, no, let him visit his wife and, everything will be fine. But Nawaf al-Hazmi's alone. So al-Hazmi just leaves the apartment of Stan. Just leaves. Tells Stan that he's leaving. So he goes to La Mesa, California, and finds a place there and gets a job at a place called Stan's Star Mart, which is a convenience car station where they service cars and they sell like menial food there, chips and stuff like that for visitors and people just traveling through the state. One of the main employees there, he's like the second in management in line, was a person by the name of Osama Mustafa. He had a nickname. He went by Sam, S-A-M. A little bit about this guy, because this guy is really nefarious. Mustafa was first investigated by the FBI in 1991 after he told a police officer that the United States needed another Pan Am 103 attack and that he himself could be the one to carry out the attack. Can you imagine telling the FBI that? I mean, you're really like, my God. I mean, put a bullseye on your back. And he also said that all Americans should be killed because of the 1991 Iraq War, the Gulf War, right? So he's telling the FBI this. It really seemed, I don't know, either mysterious or stupid to tell the FBI this because now you're under investigation. So the FBI opens up a file on him in 1994 for being a member of the Palestinian organization, the group, the PFLP, uh, and the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, headed by Yasser Arafat, and for threatening to kill an Israeli intelligence officer who was living in San Diego, in La Mesa, California. This guy, basically, he didn't care. He just didn't care. But the investigation was closed into Mustafa. And the FBI director at the time was Louis Freeh. Now, whether it came from Louis Freeh or whether it came from the special agent in charge in San Diego field office, whether it came from a supervisor, I don't know the supervisor's name, but the case was shut off right off the bat. Strange, really strange, because here's a guy who's willing to say anything and everything to get the attention of the FBI, and the case is closed. But it's reopened in 1997 because Mustafa involves himself with a terrorist plot in North Carolina. Not to mention, here's another link into the 9/11 hijackers. Sam Mustafa is a close associate of Osama Basnan. So who's Osama Basnan? Osama Basnan had a wife named Mawida Dewejak. She was getting payments from a bank account at Riggs Bank, and the account came from Haifa bin Faisal. Who is Haifa bin Faisal? Haifa bin Faisal is the wife of the U.S. Saudi ambassador, Bandar bin Sultan. Close friends to the bin Laden family, close friends to the Bush family, and served as the U.S. Saudi ambassador under Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, and Bush Jr. But he became very fond of Bush Jr. Basnan would receive anywhere between $2,500 and $4,000, not to exceed $5,000, because that gets the interest of uh, um, the federal authorities, and it becomes an investigation of where that money comes from. So these monthly payments came in like 14, I want to say 14 and 15 months. These payments kept coming in. That's who Osama Basnan was, because the money went from Haifa bin Faisal's account to Mawida Dewejak to Osama Basnan, and Basnan would give the money to Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. There's your link. Now, the manager of Stan Startmart is Ed Salama. Ed Salama. I'll post it in the room. Ed Salama. The other guy is Osama Moose. Those two names. So that if you want to, do some research on your own and find out find out more about these guys, more power to you. Go right ahead. The manager of the gas station was also investigated back in January of 2000, in which the brother of an unnamed known Al Qaeda operative who was also under surveillance was seen chatting with Ed Salama. So Ed Salama now has a connection to Al Qaeda at some level. The Los Angeles FBI office was investigating this operative, who is unnamed, and it called Salama about this person. Now they wanted to know more. However, Ed Salama refused the invitation for the interview and refused to give his home address to be interviewed there as well. So he didn't want any part of the investigation. Now the bells went off. Who are these guys? They obviously know Al Qaeda. They obviously know this guy, Nawaf al-Hazmi, who later would become part of the 9/11 attacks. And not only that, the employees of Starmart may have had foreknowledge of the 9/11 attacks before it even happened. For example, one employee was named Modar Abdullah, and I'll write that name in here for you. Mohar Abdullah is a friend of both Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar. And according to Modar Abdullah, he said that he grew very fond of these two guys. He denies the accusation that he knew about 9/11 before it happened, but according to other witnesses, they told him about the attacks in the spring of 2000. And additionally, according to another witness who is an employee who's redacted, his name is protected because he gave an interview to the FBI. Other individuals like Modar Abdullah, Osama Awadallah, and Omar Bakarabashat were also told by Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi that they were going to hijack planes and crash them into U.S. targets. He didn't tell them what targets they were. And he told them this one day before the attacks took place on the phone. Something to think about. Later, in a federal indictment, which was unsealed, Osama Stan Mustafa and other employees like Khaldun Tony Khawaja and Khawaja's brother, Mike Abdullah, who's living in Virginia, were accused of stealing, I think it was not Social Security checks, right? And they were filing false tax returns and lying to the federal government. And when the investigation opened, Mustafa fled to the country of Jordan. And Mustafa was a fugitive. And there was an FBI investigation called Operation Encore, which was a secret probe of suspecting of an they were investigating Saudi involvement to the terrorist attacks of 9/11, and he was a part of that operation, Operation Encore. And I want to say it was in the summer of 2019. Mustafa is arrested in Jordan. He's extradited, and he's now serving a 20-year sentence for fraud. So he's arrested. Modar Abdullah, I want to say that he was detained, questioned by the FBI, and denied all knowledge about foreknowledge. Now, of course, he was going to. I mean, why would he implicate himself? So it would seem that the story ends there. Stan is living his normal life in Lemon Grove, California, renting out rooms, commiserating with everybody, having a relatively short uh, relationship with Steven Butler as an informant, which ended. September 11th attacks being investigated. That's not it. During the FBI Pent Bomb investigation, it led back to the FBI informant because they did this. They retraced the steps of Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and they could only get to the third week they were inside the United States because, according to the 9/11 Commission, they don't know where they stood the first 2 weeks. The FBI did, and they didn't put that in the 9/11 Commission report. You have to ask yourself why. Why did they not put that information, which was investigated by the FBI about the Tunisian cab driver, just to fill you in too? I don't want to lose you about Khalid Benarim, the cab driver I mentioned. The FBI interviews him just days after 9/11. So they put out 30 photos, 19 of the hijackers, and asked Khalid Benarim, Who was the two men that Fahad al-Thamari told you to pick up at LAX airport? Khalid Ben took out two photos out of the 30. The two photos he selected were Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Now, this is in the document called Memorandum for the Record, and Khalid Ben name is redacted. But if you Google, and I will spell you the name, that's his name, Khalid Ben. You look up that guy, and that will come up. There's also a video by Pump It Out TV, run by Jeff Hill, that did a fantastic video about that. It's called Who is Khalid Ben? You should watch that. Anyway, Khalid Ben pushes the photos back in the 30. Here's a guy who now there's a connection. Here's a guy who pointed out two people who were involved with the 9/11 attacks, which has contacts with a high-level Saudi official running the King Fahd Mosque in Culver City, California, that is considered a link to the Saudi kingdom. What happened? The FBI shut the case down, ordered under pressure from the director, Robert Mueller. Why? Was this to protect the Saudi kingdom at the behest of national interests from the State Department? Pressure from the White House, who has a close relationship with who? Bandar bin Sultan? Remember I told you the money coming from his wife were going to an intermediary named Osama Basnan, who had a connection with Stan and Osama Mustafa, who gave a job to Nawaf al-Hazmi, who were both involved with the 9/11 attacks. So I'm not making speculation here. This is a connection. And the FBI shut down the case. They shut down the case regarding Mustafa, and they shut down the case against Khalid Ben. In fact, what they did with Khalid Ben, they deported him back to Tunisia. No one's ever heard from him again. Anyway, what happened with Stan? Well, the FBI investigating the Pent bomb investigation, go to Steven Butler. Butler retired Stan as an asset in 2002, right before Pent bomb. It was right in the middle, right at the start of Pent bomb investigation. The FBI goes to San Diego State and says, "Can we talk to your English professor here?" What's his name? Abdussattar Sheikh. Never heard of him. He's not an English professor here? Nope. They go to the international project at American Commonwealth University. But it's not a university. It's a diploma mill, which was owned and rented by a retired Air Force General, William Lyon. It wasn't even a building. So his whole profile, this guy, in which he told his handler, Steven Butler, was false. So who the hell is this guy? Well, he currently lives in Lemon Grove, California still. He's retired. And the only mention given by any of the congressional inquiries regarding this important person, I would think so, was the Joint House inquiry into Intelligence Committee into 9/11, in which the report described the informant as the intelligence community's best chance to unravel the 9/11 plot. I'll repeat that. The Joint House inquiry considered Abdussattar Sheikh, codenamed Stan, as the best chance to unravel the 9/11 plot. And that the intelligence community missed a tremendous opportunity to find and investigate Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi before the terrorist attacks happened. That's what the report said. That's not me making up. That's the report. Because the FBI, the bureaucrats of the FBI, shut down the investigations to the two people that were involved with Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi in the very early stages when they got in the country. Osama Mustafa and Fahad al-Tamari, Khalid Ben-Amri. Later, the 9/11 Commission would travel to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and interview Fahad al-Tamari and Omar al-Bayoumi. And what's right there, and by the way, the memorandum for the record, look it up. Fahad al, that's his name, Fahad al-Tamari. The 9/11 Commission report basically interviewed him. It's not redacted. You can view it in full. And said that Fahad al-Tamari was deceptive throughout the whole interview. He told the 9/11 Commission, I never heard of Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. But he was interviewed in a room where there was Saudi intelligence officials from the GID, the General Intelligence Directorate, that was standing next to him. And when he said that, one of the agents went down and whispered in his ear, and Fahad al-Tamari said, "Oh, no, I have heard about them. They were on the TV after the attacks took place." Well, in the FBI's own reports regarding Khalid Ben-Amri said, I drove both men to the King Fahd Mosque when they landed inside the United States. But the FBI can't interview him again because the FBI shut down that investigation, which came from the director, Robert Mueller. And not only that, they kicked him off and deported him back to Tunisia. Steven Butler would later retire from the San Diego field office and basically felt like he was deceived by Abdussattar Sheikh. That also his superiors in the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., shut down too many investigations, which could have had effect with the 9/11 operation. It may have not stopped all of it, but they could have stopped part of it. Because if they had watch listed, if they had basically maybe detained both of these guys, maybe Flight 77 wouldn't have been hijacked, maybe. And maybe they could have told the FBI investigators about others involved in the plot, maybe. I mean, that's speculation, but who knows? But yeah, I mean, look at all these anomalies that you're not told by the media. Look at this important story and ask yourself why you never heard of this. If you never heard of it, I'm going to assume most of you did at some point. But if you haven't, boy, isn't this just another cover up involving the intelligence services regarding two 9/11 hijackers? And these are Al Qaeda operatives. And on top of this, you had the CIA who knew they were inside the country and didn't share that information with the FBI. And I've done previous videos about this, and I'm not going to repeat myself because most of you know about the story of Alex Station and Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi's U.S. visas, which were photographed by the CIA, that was sent to the CIA. And the FBI basically tried to draft a report, a draft letter to warn headquarters, here come two Al Qaeda operatives who have connections to the US's Cole bombing and the 1998 East Africa bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. We need to start monitoring them. And the CIA wouldn't let them write that report. So it seemed like the FBI field agents who really were trying to do the right thing were basically either stonewalled by their superiors or were downright uh, withheld information intentionally withheld information from the CIA, which could have been of invaluable to them. Obviously, after considering what happened. So, if there's any questions, I'll take them. I see there's 3 or 4 people. You must be. I thank you for coming. By the way, I did this on the fly. This video, so but it's a short story. It's an important story, and more people should know about it. And it's very. Um, it also shows the cover up, which is reported by the Joint House Inquiry. Here's another failure by the FBI, another failure by the intelligence community. But if there's no more questions, I will end the video on this, and I'll see you at the next live stream. Thank you for coming.